back with another reaction. I'm doing a reaction to the mobster Crazy Joe Gallo. Um, Bob Dylan did a song about him. I really want to do like a really deep dive into who he was, and plus I love mobster stories, mobster movies, mobster documentaries. So I'm just gonna react to it. Let's go down deep into the documentary of mobster Crazy Joe Gallo. Let's get it.
Crazy Joe was a true mafioso and a stone-cold killer to boot. Born Joseph Gallo on April 7, 1929, in Brooklyn's Red Hook section, his father, Umberto, was a bootlegger during Prohibition. Doing nothing to discourage his sons from becoming criminals, Crazy Joe was arrested in 1950 and temporarily placed in the Kings County Hospital Center in Brooklyn for exhibiting signs of unusual behavior. It was during this time Crazy Joe was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Along with his brothers Albert and Lawrence, Crazy Joe joined the Profaci crime family. His rackets included gambling, extortion, and a numbers betting operation. His headquarters was an apartment on President Street in Brooklyn, where he allegedly kept a pet lion named Cleo in the basement. Within a few years, he secretly owned several Manhattan nightclubs and 2 sweatshops in the Garment District. J. Robert Nash explains, in 1957, Carlo Gambino assigned Joseph Profaci the task of assassinating Albert Anastasia. Profaci in turn selected the 3 Gallo brothers to carry out the hit. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Anastasia was relaxing in the barber shop of the Park Sheraton Hotel with a hot towel draped over his face. 2 gunmen burst into the shop, aimed their guns at the crime boss, and fired. Anastasia dropped to the floor, hit with 5 bullets. The selection of Crazy Joe and his brothers to carry out the hit was all a part of mob logic. As a former head of the mob's contract killers, Murder Incorporated, Anastasia was a dangerous man with a vast army of men under his command. Killing him would not be easy. If any mistakes were made and they missed their intended target, Gambino and Profaci could distance themselves by claiming the would-be assassins, led by Crazy Joe, acted alone. By 1958, Crazy Joe was enough of an underworld player that he was subpoenaed to testify before the United States Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor and Management, headed by Senator John McClellan and prosecutor Robert Kennedy. Upon walking into Kennedy's office, Crazy Joe quipped, "Nice carpet you got here. Good for a crap game." By 1960, Crazy Joe soared to the top of New York's social life. He became a celebrity gangster and was a regular front-page feature in New York newspapers. Reporters of the day fell in love with the story of a small-time hoodlum trying to move in on the bigger, more established rackets. By 1961, Joey and his brothers broke away from the Profaci family, primarily due to an edict handed down by Profaci himself, which increased tribute paid to the family by the crews. When Crazy Joe and his gang broke away, they did so with a brazen disregard for Profaci's authority and territory. As a result, the Profacis declared war on Crazy Joe and the Mod Squad, the chosen name of his crew. As a way to get the upper hand, Crazy Joe devised a plan to kidnap the entire Profaci leadership and use their lives to barter against the increase with the commission. American Mafia history explains, during the kidnap attempt, Profaci escaped, but 4 of his capos and his brother-in-law and underboss Joe Malioco were captured. According to records, Gallo wanted to kill one of the hostages and demand money before the negotiations began, but his brother Larry convinced him otherwise. Within weeks, a deal was struck, and Profaci reduced the amount of tribute money for the Gallo crew, and all the men were released unharmed. Both sides had argued their case before the commission, but Profaci wasn't pleased with the outcome. He was angry and wanted revenge. Profaci enlisted the aid of Carmine Persico to help him wipe out the Gallo renegades. They first went after Gallo's top enforcer, Joseph Joe Kelly Gioeli, again citing American Mafia history. In August of the same year, Larry Gallo was next on the list to be killed. He was lured to a Brooklyn supper club where Profaci hitmen, including Persico, lay in wait. Once he entered the building, he was attacked and nearly strangled to death. If it weren't for a passing police officer who stopped the attack, Larry would have been killed. When asked to identify his attackers, Larry Gallo, true to omerta, quipped, "What are you talking about? Nobody would want to do that to me." As the war drug on, the attention the other families were getting from law enforcement and media coverage was hurting everybody's business, the other bosses explained to Profaci. "You and Gallo need to call it quits. Just bury the hatchet already." But being the stubborn and selfish man that he was, Profaci refused to make peace. With the support of fellow boss and longtime friend Joseph Bonanno, Profaci was able to keep the commission off his back as he continued to bleed the gallows dry in both blood and finances. But Profaci never saw victory against the gallows. He died the following year at the age of 64. But that didn't mean Crazy Joe was on top. He was in prison doing a 10-year stretch for extortion when Profaci died, and he wouldn't be up for parole for another 7 years. When that day finally came, a strange event took place. A guard at the prison testified on behalf of Crazy Joe, describing an incredible scene to the parole board. During a riot, the guard was attacked by several inmates. He was certain the inmates would kill him, but before they could, Joe Gallo fought off the attackers and saved the officer's life. His clean history while serving time and the guard's story aided in his release. But during his time in prison, Joe Colombo had been appointed boss of the Profaci family by the commission. But nothing doing. Even after his long absence, Crazy Joe still believed he should be the boss. American Mafia history continues. After Gallo's release from prison, Joe Colombo and Joseph Iacovelli met with him and delivered a gift of $1,000. Gallo responded to Colombo that he was no part of the peace treaty the commission had established while he was in prison. He asked for $100,000 to keep the peace. When the commission heard of Gallo's answer, they immediately issued an order to kill him. But Crazy Joe struck first, taking Colombo out on June 28, 1971, during the second rally of the Italian-American Civil Rights League. While serving his time on extortion charges, Joe had cultivated relationships with a few gangsters outside the ranks of the mafia. J. Robert Nash writes, "Gallo understood the changing urban environment and realized sooner or later the mafia would be forced into a position of relinquishing control of inner-city trafficking and loan sharking. A number of black gunmen found employment in the Gallo family following their release from prison, and it was assumed that one of these black gunmen, a man by the name of Jerome Johnson, was Joe Colombo's executioner. With Colombo out of the way, Crazy Joe probably thought he was now at the top of the heap. But 10 months later, on his birthday, April 7th, any delusions Crazy Joe may have had of renaming the Borgata the Gallo family came to a violent end. He began the evening having dinner with his friend Jerry Orbach, comedian David Steinberg, and columnist Earl Wilson at the Copacabana. Around 4 in the morning, Crazy Joe and a few friends ended up at Umberta's Clam House. Gallo, his back to the door, didn't notice a lone gunman enter the restaurant armed with a .38 caliber handgun. The assassin took aim and opened up on Joe, who scrambled for the door. Crazy Joe Gallo died in a pool of blood just outside the front entrance. His remains were taken to the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. The shooter was never identified.
Wow. That's crazy. Joe Gallo went against one rule that I know of. Never turn your back towards the door, especially if you're in a life like that. You want to always see who's coming in and out. But you can tell that he was a renegade within the mafia. You can tell he wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he just went against the grain, against certain factions of the mafia. Definitely, I can see Bob Dylan's illustrations through this documentary. Everything Bob Dylan said in his, I can see in his music, I can see in this documentary. He was a social, like he was in front of the camera, just like other gangsters, did, in the future, after him. And this was a good documentary, and you can definitely see that he was definitely not one to play with. The relationships that he formed in jail with the blacks just showed you that he was changing with the times. Hiring black gunmen to kill just was something unheard of, and he did it. So but you live by the gun, you die by the gun. So did his brother, so did his his one of his top enforcers. That was a bloody time, I see. And I can tell you, I can see that he stayed in the papers. You can see that with the same thing as the Teflon Don. His was more gruesome, I think, but you just like the Teflon Don, in his rise, it is similar. It mirrors Crazy Joe. For Crazy Joe to grow up in a mental institution and get out is something crazy. Crazy Joe was in a mental institution when he was younger, and he went through a lot growing up. To have two or a lion in his basement, and you can tell what type of person he was. The business ventures that he had, the underworld pool that he had, just the rubbing elbows with the stars. You can tell that he was a brazen and sociable type of gangster, but he was a gangster, quick to kill you. But you guys have any comments, put in the comment box, like, subscribe, share.
2 through 3s and F&M bullets to rip through tissue. Better say your last goodbyes, cause your fam gon' miss you. A shooting star, so them headshots is not gon' miss you. A young coach, so I'm playing games with her mental.